Hi everybody. I know it's been like 2 hours since I was talking on here, but I've learned a little tidbit of information over the past few hours. It was told to me by a source that the Steelers have reached out to the Denver Broncos about Courtland Sutton. And while that, some people are like, "Oh, that can be assumed." Well, of course, sure, things can be assumed, but you know what assuming does? It makes an asset of you and me. But no, I can, per a source who told me that the Steelers have reached out to Denver about Courtland Sutton. Now, this doesn't mean all of a sudden that a trade is imminent and 1,000% happening, but it does mean that the dialogue has at least opened up between the two teams. Um, Russell Wilson and Courtland Sutton have a good relationship. And as we talked about earlier, the Steelers created $7 million in cap space in order to make some sort of move. And again, the timing of it tells me that they are going to make a trade at receiver. Being that that is one of their biggest needs, and you're not going to be able to trade for a center, you're not going to be able to trade for a tackle. Teams aren't getting rid of those. But as I said, it was told to me that the Pittsburgh Steelers have reached out to the Denver Broncos about Courtland Sutton, and the dialogue has opened. Again, doesn't mean that a trade is 100% going to happen, but the communication has at least opened to where, it went from being speculation to, okay, the Steelers are really, really reaching out about this. So, this is a move that would make more sense to me historically for the Steelers than, a move for Brandon Ayuk, which has also been heavily speculated. That's not to say that if the Steelers did trade for Brandon Ayuk that I would be like completely surprised, because I think it's still very much on the table. But being the fact that there's an existing relationship between new quarterback Russell Wilson and Courtland Sutton, along with the fact that they wouldn't have to give up as much to get Sutton, that's the move that would make more sense to me logically as a Steelers fan and kind of seeing how this team is operated. Again, granted, Omar Khan and Kevin Colbert are two very different general managers, but even then, a move like this is something that we wouldn't have seen under Kevin Colbert. So again, I'm being told that the Steelers have reached out to Denver about Courtland Sutton. And, for those who don't know, Courtland Sutton is seeking a new contract. He only has $2 million in guaranteed money remaining on his deal. And if Denver isn't going to be the place to pay it, somebody will. And, he wants a new contract. He wants to be valued. He wants to be, respected. And he's been with the team since 2018 is when he got drafted out of SMU. He's a former Pro Bowler. He's a really good receiver. He had his career high in touchdown receptions last year with 10, which topped his previous career high, which was 6. So he had a really nice year last year. The chemistry with Russell Wilson clearly was there. And as I said, him and Russell Wilson have a good relationship. So this is something where, if the Steelers want to get a receiver, but also replenish their offensive line, this could be a situation where they have their cake and eat it too. Because in terms of a trade for Brandon Ayuk, that will probably cost you at minimum a pick swap in the first round where they go from 20 to 31 and maybe give up a first round pick next year along with, a third round pick in this year's draft or a fourth round pick or whatever it may be. With Courtland Sutton, we saw what Jerry Jeudy went for going out of Denver, and that was a pair of day 3 picks to the Steelers division rival Cleveland Browns. I think Sutton will garner more than that because he's better than Jerry Jeudy. And if the Steelers were to offer their 4th round pick, which is pick number 119, maybe a 4th and a 6th would get the deal done. Maybe just the 4th would get the deal done. One of their 3rds, maybe. I'm just kind of spitballing ideas here. But it's on the table. And again, this is a situation where the Steelers can salvage, their at least 3 of their picks in the top 100, assuming that they don't get rid of one of them in order to get Sutton. But even then, if they do, worst case scenario, you have 3 top 100 picks to get yourself a center, get yourself a left tackle or a right tackle, depending on what they decide to do with Broderick Jones. And now you don't have to necessarily worry about receiver as much as you did, because now you have George Pickens and Courtland Sutton to be your top two guys. Pat Freiermuth is probably going to be like their predominant slot guy in this offense. That's what Kyle Pitts was last year, basically just a slot receiver. And you have Van Jefferson, who you brought in to be, that third/fourth receiver. You don't have to necessarily worry too much about receiver right now. You can still take one if you want, but it's not as big of a need as it was before. So you can address the cornerback situation. Talked about it earlier today, where outside of Joey Porter and Dante Jackson, Darius Rush would be their starting nickel right now. And he was a rookie last year. Corey Trice is the only other guy on the roster, really, who has any chance of seeing playing time. And he's still basically a rookie because he missed the entirety of last year with the torn ACL. So it takes away your need to really feel like you got to take a receiver in the second or third round, because you bring over a Courtland Sutton to be your other outside guy, opposite of Pickens. You already have Pat Freiermuth, who's basically just going to be a big power slot rather than lined up at tight end too much. It makes perfect sense for the Steelers to orchestrate something like this. And again, that's not to say that A, it's 100% going to happen, or B, that it takes them completely out of the Brandon Ayuk sweepstakes. It doesn't. What it does mean is that the dialogue between Pittsburgh and Denver has opened. The conversation has been had, or at least the olive branch has been extended by Pittsburgh to at least, put out a feeler and say, hey, what would it take to get Courtland Sutton? Those are conversations that have been had. That's what's been told to me by a source. So it's a move that would make sense to me for the reasons I've pointed out, because if you're the Steelers, that means you can stay put at 20. And if you really like Graham Barton, you can take Graham Barton and bam, there's your center. Or if you really like Amarius Mims and you can get Zach Frazier, then you got a tackle and a center along with a receiver. Your three biggest needs you took care of in some way. And so I think that a trade for Sutton would make more sense because of that. And again, I want to very clearly reiterate this, because there's going to be some asshole on Twitter who's like, hey, you said the Steelers were definitely trading for Courtland Sutton. No, I fucking didn't. So I want to get that out of the way very, very clearly. I'm not reporting that they are 100% trading for Courtland Sutton. I'm merely saying there has been the dialogue. That's confirmed that there's been dialogue, that the Steelers have reached out to Denver and said, hey, we're just, what will it take to, what's the price for Courtland Sutton? Those are conversations that have been had. So before I get John Friskellet again on Twitter, who's claiming I said things I didn't, I just want to put that out there. So the Steelers have extended, some sort of olive branch, saying that they've reached out. They've reached out to Denver about Courtland Sutton, and it's a move that would make sense. Again, if it takes, trading pick number 119, which is in the fourth round, okay. If it takes pick number 98, okay. I can't see him going for more than a third round pick. I think that's the very highest that they would trade to get him, or really have to trade to get him, just because of what the market has shown us so far this offseason. Jerry Jeudy, his teammate, went for a pair of day 3 picks. Deontay Johnson, the Steelers traded for a 6th round pick and a player. So if I had to guess, it'll be maybe a 4th round pick number 119, and maybe their 6th round pick, which I think is pick number 195. I'd have to go back and look. They have 2 6th round picks. I don't have a 7th round pick this year. So that's what I see it going for. Could I also see pick number 98 and a 6th? Sure. I could also see it just being a 3rd round pick for Courtland Sutton straight up. That's fine. I could see it being just a 4th round pick for Courtland Sutton straight up. I don't see it being more than 2 picks, though. I think that that's going to be the cap of what it's at, is the Steelers trade a 3rd and a 6th, a 4th and a 6th, or just one of the 3rds, or their 4th round pick to get him. I don't think it's going to take more than that. Or hell, maybe it's, a pick in this year's draft and a day 3 next year's draft. We've seen, they got Justin Fields for a day 3 next year. So who's to say that they can't pull something off like that, where they trade, this year's 4th and next year's 5th, or this year's 3rd and next year's 6th, or they have 2 7ths next year, a 3rd this year and both 7ths that they got from Philadelphia for Kenny Pickett. There's a medley of options that they have, in terms of being able to make this move should they decide to pull the trigger on it. But again, this is not to say that the Steelers have 100% acquired Courtland Sutton or that a trade is imminent. I'm not saying that. I am saying that the dialogue has opened and that they have reached out to Denver and at least poked around and put out a feeler and said, okay, what'll it take to get Courtland Sutton? So that is what I'm being told. We have a comment. Let's get you in here. 4th rounder for Courtland Sutton would be the max I would go. Injury history, contract would definitely lower the cost. Yeah, I mean, his cap hit right now is $17.4 million roughly. I think if there's some designation where if it's post June 1, I think the Broncos take on like $7 million of that. I'm not going to pretend to be like a complete cap expert when it comes to that stuff or know the ins and outs of his contract right now. I'd have to go look it over the cap just to see the total terms of it and whatnot. But right now his cap hit is 17.4 million. So that's the other thing you got to weigh out. If the Steelers traded for him, they're taking on a bigger cap hit this year than they would take with Brandon Ayuk, who's about a $14 million cap hit. But the money that they would eventually pay Ayuk is going to be much more than they would give Courtland Sutton. So it's, a balancing game. Now, the Steelers are also projected to have a ton of cap space next year. I think the last report that I saw was they're about $85 million expecting next year. So, they're going to have money to work with no matter who they get, whether it's Courtland Sutton, whether it's Brandon Ayuk. So I'm not too worried about the money stuff, especially not this year when they're not paying anybody offensively, where they have, what is it, like $3 million tied up combined with Fields and Russ, or $5 million. I don't remember the exact number, but I'm not worried about it too much this year. And plus, they can still restructure TJ Watt's deal to free up more money should they go that route. They could restructure Minkah Fitzpatrick's deal to free up more money. There's a bunch of moves that they can still make. Like Alex Highsmith, I think, was the first guy they've restructured all offseason, and they still had $11 million prior to doing that. So they can still move some money around, convert, some money to signing bonuses, roster bonuses, things of that nature to free up cap space. But I'm, especially if they want to address nickel corner after the draft, let's say they aren't necessarily comfortable with what their defensive backfield looks like after the draft, they can go out and get a K'Wan Williams in free agency, move a few $1 million around and make the move happen. There's still a few things that they can do to create easy cap space. And I think they're waiting until after the draft to see what they want to do, what their biggest needs remain in order to do that. And if they feel like, hey, we don't necessarily need to make too many changes this year, then we're not going to bother to do it, because why would we? So I'm not necessarily worried about the money. And yeah, in terms of what I think he'll go for, I think you're probably right. I think 4th and maybe an additional day 3 pick would be my best guess. If it's a 3rd rounder, I'm not going to be too bothered by it, because he's still, 28 years old. He's still got a few, really good, solid years of football left in him. And that's another thing that we need to talk about with Courtland Sutton is, yeah, he has been really good with really bad quarterback play. Like last year with Russ, when they, figured out a chemistry, he had one of his best career years. He had a career high in touchdown receptions with 10, which is 4 more than his previous career high. But look how many quarterbacks he's had to play with. It's been Joe Flacco, Case Keenum, I think Teddy Bridgewater for a minute, Jarrett Stidham, Drew Lock, Jeff Driscoll. Like, he hasn't really been dealt a great hand. And last year, in a good offense, when him and Russ had some chemistry, he had a really good year. So, and plus his relationship with Russell Wilson is a very good one. It's a move that makes sense. Again, I'm not worried about the money side of things because the Steelers are going to have money to spend. They can move around money this year if they want to make other moves. So money-wise, I'm not worried about it. And I don't think I would be very surprised if he went for anything more than a 3rd. I think that's probably the max that they would give up. And I think it would be the 98th pick rather than the 84th. Just my guess. Again, we'll see. 17.4 million on the trade. Yeah. He also told the Broncos he wants an yes. So the thing with his extension is he only has $2 million in guaranteed money left on his deal. There's a lot of other factors that play into that, but he wants an extension to get more money. On his recent contract, he kind of took a team-friendly type deal and, had higher expectations for what was coming. So that's why he wants more money, because, the Broncos haven't really had a lot of success and they haven't been serious about the quarterback position. So, I think there's a lot of frustration there. And again, that's a deal that the Steelers, if they trade for him, I would guess are going to give him. And, people have been worried about George Pickens if they acquire Brandon Ayuk. Well, if you trade for Courtland Sutton, you're not going to give him as much money as you were going to give Brandon Ayuk. So you're going to be able to pay both Sutton and Pickens when the time comes to give Pickens an extension. So it's an overall good move if it does take place. That's what I'm not worried about. Get down here. I appreciate you, Noah, for keeping the conversation going. What do you think the extension would look like? Saying that $15 to $20 million range? Probably. I think that's fair. I'd have to look at other receivers of his value, I guess, because Deontay Johnson, his was about $18 million a year, and he got an extension. But again, that was before Devontae Smith. That was before Amon-Ra St. Brown. That was also a few years ago. So it'll probably go up a little bit. I'd say probably in the $19 to $20 million range is fine, especially when you look at what the market for receivers is going to be, because Justin Jefferson still has to get paid. Jamar Chase still has to get paid. The Bengals picked up his fifth-year option, but they haven't come to an extension yet. CeeDee Lamb still has to get paid. I wouldn't quite put Sutton in that category. I think he's probably closer to the Deontay Johnson category. Whether you think that he's better than Deontay Johnson, that's, up for your own opinion. But yeah, I think that's somewhere between like the 18 to 20, $21 million per year range. I think that's probably a safe bet for when the time comes. Amon-Ra got $30 million a year. He's the highest paid receiver in NFL history. So Justin Jefferson's getting at least 31. And if he does it before CeeDee Lamb, guess what? CeeDee Lamb's getting at least 31.5. And if CeeDee Lamb gets it before Jamar Chase, guess what? Jamar Chase is getting at least 32. It's going to keep going up. That's how the market works. So I'm not too worried, like I said, about the money, about the extension, anything like that. I think it'll all come into place. The Steelers have enough money to work with next year. So I'm not too worried about it. But I think that this is a move that makes sense. Should it take place? I'm excited to see what happens tomorrow. And again, I want to make it pretty clear just before people rush to Twitter and say that, the Steelers are absolutely trading for Courtland Sutton. Not reporting that at all. I'm merely reporting that the Steelers have reached out, that the olive branch has been extended, that they have asked, hey, what would it take to get Courtland Sutton? That those conversations have been had between Pittsburgh and Denver. And that's something to keep an eye on in the next 24 to 48 hours to see if a deal is made. Especially like after tomorrow. Like if the Steelers stay put at 20 and don't trade for Brandon Ayuk, I'd bet the mortgage that they're gonna trade for Courtland Sutton. And we'll see what happens. But very much looking forward to seeing what the next couple days bring. And it's gonna be. Steelers have had the most hectic offseason of my lifetime, and it's very fun being a guy who's a fan of the team, who covers the league, who covers the team. It's been very fun. Been a very fun offseason. It's not done yet. If you're here and you like this type of content, you like getting some random news on a Wednesday before the NFL draft, like the video, subscribe to the channel. It would mean a lot to me. I know I say this in every video. I know I hate when people do all that YouTube stuff, but it does help out the channel. So I get it. But if you could like, subscribe, that would be awesome. I'd really appreciate it. I was supposed to do my final mock draft at 3:30, but then I got this information, so I wanted to be able to talk about it. I'll do my mock draft some point today, I promise. But again, the Steelers have reached out to Denver, inquiring about wide receiver Courtland Sutton, and we'll see if that ends up being the move that they do make at receiver in the next 48 hours once the NFL draft kicks off. So I appreciate y'all for tuning in. If you have any other questions or want to keep up with me, you can follow me on Twitter at JBaileyNFL. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. And again, my mock draft, I'll do the video for that later on tonight, so keep an eye out for that. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you soon.